If anyone would like coffee at 7 o'clock at night.
I had some on my before I headed over.
I always make fun of him that he's the only guy that drinks coffee at this hour, but evidently there's two of you.
I needed it. I flew in this morning.
Okay.
I got 2 hours of sleep last night, so we're
Carolina, you came in from Carolina?
yep.
All
Very
right,
nice.
you now.
Need to be here.
Thank you.
You may.
Okay, we are live on YouTube, live on Facebook. We are gonna just share this on 2 other social media platforms, and we will be good to go. You said your name is Marshall. We have Ian and his grandpa and his Zaidi Marshall with us here, and Seth, of course, and Chaya. It's a busy night here at the shul, and class is gonna end at 7:30, and we're gonna end on time because there's a news reporter coming at 7:30 for me to do my 9,000 interview about Israel since the war started. This time it's a reporter, I believe, coming from Big Sky. So evidently there's news in Big Sky too. So we're just going to share this and get moving. We're going to start today. We are in the 7th portion in the book of Genesis, in the book of Bereshis. And as I share this, I'll tell you where to open up. We're in Vayetze, yeah, but let me just find the page. Careful, Chai, with the stem.
Is 169.
So it's chapter 30, verse 43. So that should be page 186. If you want to open up to 186, that's where we're going to start today in the live Chumash. Kayla Gittel, I see that you're on, and I want you to know you gave me one of the most entertaining letters that came in the mail. I got a letter in the mail that said it was addressed to Rockin' Rabbi Chaim, and then it had her address in California, and under the word CA, there was an arrow. It said, not God's country. She was mad because I always call Montana God's country. So I got that came in yesterday's mail. Kayla Gittel, you gave us a lot of joy yesterday when the mail came. Thank you for that. Okay. Well, we got to let some more people in. There we go. And we're covered on all our platforms, and we are going to get rolling right here, right now. Okay.
Right here, River City. Oh.
There we go. What a crowd tonight on Zoom and YouTube and in person. What a beautiful crowd. Kenai Nahara. Okay, so we are in the portion of Vayetze. We left off last week. We were in the portion where Esau comes home from his hunting trip and he finds that Jacob, his younger brother, his twin brother, who was the second, who had bought the birthright from him for a pot of lentils, had listened to his mother's advice, to Rebekah's advice, and deceived Isaac and took the blessings from Isaac, presenting himself as Esau. And then Jacob has to be sent away, and he goes, in this week's Torah portion, he goes to his uncle Laban's house in Haran, up in the border of Syria and Turkey. Now, when you're a deceiver, when you deceive someone, even if it comes with you because your mother told you to and because you had very righteous intentions, you end up getting a little taste of your own medicine. And so Jacob now goes to his uncle and he finds out that if you want to meet a real person that lives by the laws of deception, Laban is the guy, right? He's a thief, he's a conniving thief, he's a cheater. So he tells Jacob, work for me for 7 years and I'll give you want to marry the love of your life, your cousin Rachel, my daughter, no problem. Work 7 years, you're covered. He worked 7 years. The night of his wedding, Jacob, exactly. So Laban gives his daughter Leah, the older daughter, to Jacob as a wife. When Rachel sees that Leah is going to be, she doesn't want her older sister to be embarrassed and shamed, so they had some internal secretive signs to know, because they already had in mind that maybe the father-in-law was a little bit of a cheater, so they had some signs that she's the right one. She gave her older sister the signs, and the first night of the wedding, he consummated the marriage with the older wife, with Leah. He wakes up in the morning, and it says, Leah, it's Leah, it's not Rachel, it's not Rachel. So he runs to his father-in-law and says, hello, you promised me Rachel, I ended up with Leah. And his father-in-law, in Yiddish, we say cold-bloodedly says, what do you mean? You think in this neighborhood we'd give a younger sister before the older sister? fact that he gave his word was irrelevant because he was a liar and a thief and a deceiver. So he works another 7 years and he gets to marry Rachel. He marries Zilpah as a concubine, Zilpah, which is Leah's maidservant. Then he marries Bilhah, which is Rachel's maidservant. So now he has 4 wives, 2 sisters, 2 concubines, and now we're going to have 12 boys and 1 girl. Dinah's the girl. Leah gives birth to 6 of them. Bilhah and Zilpah give each birth to 2 of them. And of course, eventually Rachel overcomes her plague of infertility. She gives birth to Joseph. And then later, next week's Parsha, she gives birth to Benjamin when she passes away in childbirth. That's the shorter version of all of it. In the process of all of this, Lavan sees an incredible level of wealth that is gifted to him because he has Jacob in his house. Jacob is a walking blessing. He's a patriarch of the Jewish people. So wherever he goes, he was immensely blessed by his father Isaac. He managed to live 15 years of his life with his grandfather Abraham. Right? Abraham passed away when he was 175 years old. Isaac and Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac was born. Right? Remember, he had this miracle, him and Sarah. He was 100 years old when Isaac got married when he was 40, and Isaac gave birth to his twin sons with Rebekah when he was 60. Right? So he was 100. At that point, how old was Abraham when his grandchildren were born, the twin boys? He was 160, and he passed away at 175. So the last 15 years of his life, he got to be with Jacob. So he knows Jacob. Jacob knows him. So he has Jacob, he has Isaac, and now Jacob comes with all these blessings and moves into his lying uncle's house, and the house becomes incredibly blessed. But in the process, Jacob is also trying to make a living. He's going to get married. He's going to have children. He needs to have a nest egg. He has to have a savings account. So he gets incredibly blessed with a lot of things, but the primary thing is sheep with this flock. And if you look at the end of page 187, verse 43, right at the end of the page, it says, the man Jacob became exceedingly wealthy. He had extremely fertile flocks and maids, servants, camels, and donkeys. So there was this whole thing, and it's beyond the scope of today's class, where they were going to divide up which sheep, how they look, depending on how they look, they'll go to Jacob, and then the others will go to Laban. The bottom line is somehow Jacob made it out like a bandit, where a lot of the sheep ended up looking exactly like the ones that were promised to him, and he makes an incredible level of wealth from that. Now, Rashi says, you don't have Rashi here in this Chumash. Actually, you could see it. It doesn't have it in the Hebrew, but it has it in English on page 186 at the bottom. It's fine. Right here on page 186, where it says fertile flocks of maidservants, camels, and donkeys. And it says he would sell his flocks at a high price and purchase all the things. That's Rashi. Rashi says that his primary wealth came from the sheep. He had so much sheep, and it was such a hot commodity that he would sell his sheep at a very high price. By the way, till today, just FYI, in the Middle East, they eat a lot of sheep. That's, they have a lot of barbecues, and they eat a lot of lamb. And so if you had a lot of that, and the Arabs want to buy it, by the way, there were Arabs back then. There were just no Muslims. Muslims came 2,000 years later, but Arabs were people that lived in the Arabian Peninsula. So if people wanted to buy it, and he had a lot of it, he would sell it at a high price, and then he had enough money to buy whatever else he needed. He needed maidservants, he needed slaves, he needed, what did he say over there? He needed camels, he needed donkeys. He could buy that with the cash flow that he had from his sheep. But there has to be something deeper than just the commodity report. You ever hear those radio reports here in Montana? The price of corn is up by 2 cents, and the October corn is up by 2 cents. And I listen to it, and I'm wondering who listens to this thing. I guess a few ranchers listen to it, but there has to be more than just a financial thing here. Why is it that the foundation of our patriarch Jacob's wealth is flock, his sheep, and we need to know that? In other words, why is that information valuable to us? And so what I share with you tonight is a very in-depth, it's a synopsis of an in-depth talk from the Rebbe in the 15th volume of his edited talks, volume 15, which I'm assuming is probably from a talk in the 70s. He says as follows: what is a sheep? right? When we use the term sheep, what do we always say? Like a sheep to slaughter. Why is that? Why? It's not by mistake that we use that term. Sheep are very, very devoted, subservient, nullified to their shepherd. The shepherd tells them go here, they go here. Tell them to go there, they go there. They don't have their own brilliant ideas of saying, well, I'm going to run off to here, or I'll ignore my shepherd. They're very weak-natured. It's very clear when you deal with sheep that they're just like a walking embodiment of whatever the shepherd wants. And that's, by the way, why we have the term katsoin latevach. It's not just in English. In Hebrew, too, in our prayers, we say katsoin latevach, like a sheep to slaughter. Because they're so dumb, and they're so given over to their shepherd, they don't have a say, that they end up, if you tell them to walk off a cliff, they'll walk off a cliff. And so why is that something that the Jews can relate to? Not only because too often the Jews were taken like sheep to slaughter, but more importantly, that when we serve God, the foundation of the service of a Jewish person to God needs to be with total subservience, like a sheep to a shepherd. Your importance, your opinion, your agenda, your ego is not relevant when you're standing and serving God. It's the thing that makes Jews most crazy about religion. They think God cares about their opinion. He doesn't. If he did, he would consult you with you before he wrote the Torah, before he gave us the Torah. The Jews walk in and say, my God would never command. What do you mean your God would never command? He did. Look at Leviticus. Look at Numbers. What do you mean? You don't get to make up what God says, right? There was that famous line that God created us in his image, right? Every human being is created in God's image. We don't get to create God in our image. You don't get to take your politics or your ideology or your worldview and now somehow lump it into God as if he works for you or something and you could tell him what he's supposed to tell you. That's not religion. And if it is, you should name it after yourself. Right? If your name is Goldberg, call it Goldbergism, not Judaism, because you made it up yourself. Judaism, by definition, is a religion that is God-based, and like sheep, like flock to a shepherd, we are meant to listen to what God says, even when it's uncomfortable, and even when we might have our own opinion. We give over our own opinion, we remove it, and we listen to whatever God tells us. But that's not enough. What did Jacob do? What did Rashi say? He sold some of his sheep and purchased other things, camels, donkeys, maidservants, slaves. And the truth is that Jews need to do the same thing. You have to be able to have other character traits as well. It's not enough to walk around like a sheep all day, where your existence is totally weak and even meek like a sheep, and then you get trampled on. You need to purchase other character traits. You need to acquire other character traits, like a camel, like a donkey, like an ox. And yet, even when you purchase those other traits, you have to remember that you purchased it with the money of the sheep. Meaning, it has to have a foundation. The foundation is always the sheep. What comes afterwards is other character traits. For example, the first law in Judaism, right? If you ask someone in Walmart, standing in aisle 37, excuse me, what's the first law in the Code of Jewish Law? If you opened up the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, which is somewhere here, right? If you open up the Code of Jewish Law, what is the first halacha? No. Read. I'm quoting, okay? I just opened up the Shulchan Aruch. The first laws start with how you wake up in the morning. What does it say? Yehuda ben Tema Omer, Judah ben Tema says, be bold like a leopard, swift like an eagle, or light like an eagle, swift like a deer, strong like a lion to do the will of your Father in heaven. And what does that mean? Bold like a leopard, that you should not be ashamed from those who scoff at you. Be bold. So what if someone's making fun of your yarmulke? So what if some idiot is screaming free Palestine or from the river to the sea? So what? I'm going to go duck and cover? Who's making noise? We got to go mute. So the first halacha is be bold like a leopard. We saw a leopard in South Africa when we were there in August. Let me tell you, he don't care what anyone thinks. He sleeps when he wants. A kakvinavil, a pishvinavil, whatever he wants, he does. If you're lucky, he doesn't hurt you along the way, but he lives his life. He doesn't care. The first halacha is for a Jew to know that we should not be meek and weak. We should not be flimsy. We should not be ducking and hiding. You don't have to be in people's face. We're not a nasty people. We're not trying to get on people's nerves, but bold like a leopard. That's how we operate. You have to have a certain level of chutzpah, a certain level of boldness to be able to overcome your internal demons, the strength of overcoming your inner enemy, and also the ability to stand up to enemies that might be outside of you. So, while your foundation needs to be total subservience to the shepherd, to God, you take the money from some of that flock, you sell it, and you acquire other traits, including the trait that it starts off in the Code of Jewish Law, which is to be a bold Jew. You know, there's that famous video. I actually tried to find it this week. I saw it a while ago. Of when Menachem Begin came to Congress in the 70s, I think it was the 70s, late 70s. President Biden was a senator back then, and something to the effect where he said, "We are not weak-kneed Jews." And he goes on a whole rant in some eloquent wording, right? Because they used to speak English like normal people back then. Beautiful words, eloquently, where he talks about how we're not weak-kneed. We're not Jews with quaking knees. We're not shaking in our boots. We're bold. We're strong. We have what it takes to take on the enemy. It's comfortable? No. Is it easy? No. Is it fun? No. But we're not. We don't just disappear. And if we were just sheep, we would. We'd end up like sheep to the slaughter. By the way, the world prefers the Jews that go like sheep to the slaughter. It's their preference. They don't like when Jews have the ability to fight back. But that's exactly what he's saying. That Jacob, our patriarch, sure, his foundation was always his subservience, the fact that he was immersed and given over to God, but never at the expense of not having the other character traits that are needed to be a Jew, which includes boldness and chutzpah. And if you look at what Jacob did, is that, first of all, he purchased other items, sheep and camels, with the money. In other words, if you're going to be bold and you're going to have Jewish chutzpah, you have to always realize that you could only have healthy chutzpah. There's arrogance, which isn't healthy. There's arrogance, which is narcissistic. That's not Judaism. That's just pure arrogance, which is disgusting. It's actually the most disgusting trait to have is arrogance. From a Jewish perspective, the most unbecoming trait that a person could have is narcissism, unexplained ego and overflowing arrogance. But boldness and arrogance are not the same thing. Boldness just means standing up for your principles and for who you are, your identity. And if you have the foundation of being a tzayin, being a flock, a sheep, so you recognize this is all about God and my relationship with God, and in the process of that, I also know how to be bold, then it's healthy and good. And even later, right? Even later when Jacob purchased all these other things, maidservants and slaves and camels and donkeys, right? What was his primary, what remained forever? His primary acquisition, his primary wealth? The sheep, right? Because no matter what the other character traits are, which are important, boldness and chutzpah, etc., and all the other important things, you can never forget that your primary function as a Jew, to be a Jacob, not an Esau, is to be subservient and immersed in the godly experience, not in your own ego, even in your boldness, which is an important lesson, because I think with what's going on in the world the last 6.5 weeks, too many Jews are talking a language that sounds a little too much Esau-like. Not because they mean it that way, but when you're in a state of war, you suddenly start talking that lingo. We're going to get them. We're going to bomb them. We're going to sweat. Okay, guys, take it chill. We're going to do whatever we have to do to protect the Jewish people, but we're still Jacob. We're not Esau. Our primary focus is prayer and charity and goodness and kindness and sensitivity and edelkeit, refinement, being a refined individual, not a big warrior, a big machine. That's not for us. We're not the people with the RPGs. We're the people with the prayer books. And we happen to have an army that knows how to protect our nation, which is vital and important, and we pray for them. But let's remember that that's secondary to being a Jacob. Jacob means a person that sits bebittel, with nullification to God and service of God. And yet, after all what I just said, there's an important thing that happens in next week's Torah portion. And that is, actually, if you want to see it inside, it's chapter 32. Huh? Well, no, it's connected. If you look at chapter 32, verse 6, so it's right at the beginning, right? If you look right on page 201 in Vayishlach next week, it says in verse 6, right? Jacob is now sending messengers to his brother Esau, right? So what does he tell Esau? I possess oxen, donkeys, flocks, servants, and maids, right? So what is it? First he says oxen, then he says donkeys, and only after that does he say flocks. If Jacob is all about the flock, why, when he's sending messengers to Esau, does he begin the process with oxen and donkeys and not flock?
It shows strength. It means more to Esau.
Oh, well, close, warm.
It shows strength to Esau.
Because to ourselves, we have to always be the tzoyin, the flock, the sheep. In other words, when we're dealing with our internal service of God, our nullification to God is always primary. Meaning, when I look at myself in the mirror, when I look at myself, when I daven 3 times a day, when I pray, when I'm doing, what am I? I'm a sheep, like we had when Eliezer last 2 weeks ago. When Eliezer goes to find the wife for Isaac, and they ask him who is he. He introduces himself to Besuel and to Lavan, right? And he says, he doesn't even say his name. He doesn't say, I am Eliezer. He said, very good. He says, Eved Avram, I'm Abraham's servant. That's who you want to know who I am? I'm Abraham's servant. That is the way a Jew serves God. Not with boldness, not with chutzpah, not, God forbid, with arrogance or narcissism. I am a servant of God. That's all with yourself. But when you're dealing with an Esau, when you're dealing, Jacob knew Esau very well, right? Esau was a rapist. Esau was a murderer. He was an idolater. He was a womanizer. He was a liar. He was a thief. He was every label you could think of. That was Esau. And it was sad because he had incredible parents like Isaac and Rebekah who loved him with every fiber of their being. But he turned out to be a kid with a lot of troubles. But when you're dealing with an Esau, right, with those that oppose the service of God, those that mess with the Jacobs of the world, over here you need to show the boldness. You need to show the strength. You need to have some chutzpah, because otherwise you'll never beat them. I've never met a sheep that beat a war against another animal. Could you name me the animal that a sheep ever won a war against? Right, the Greeks, in the story of Hanukkah, the Syrian Greeks, they came riding into Israel on what animal? Elephants. So you have warriors that go on horses. You have warriors that go on elephants. I'm guessing in the Middle East, you have warriors that go on donkeys and camels. I never saw an army going to war with sheep. You know why? Because they're dumb. And they're meek, and they're weak, and you don't go to war with them. So if Jacob would have sent messengers and tell Esau, hey, by the way, I have sheep. You know who I am? I'm a Jew with meekness, with weakness. Esau's message that he would get from that is, oh, good, this is going to be fun. We'll take this dude out, both spiritually in the spiritual war and practically. So he didn't do that. First, he told the messengers, tell him that I have lots and lots of oxen and lots of donkey. And yeah, by the way, I also have sheep, because he wanted to give Esau a little jolt, a little wake-up call for him to realize it's not worth messing with Jacob. Yes, we might be generally a pretty calm, sensitive people who don't like war. And by the way, Jews don't. I asked the newspaper reporter last week, they called me from the Chronicle about something. And I said, tell me, I love when I become the journalist and I start asking the reporter the questions. I said, tell me, did you ever, is there anywhere in this country that you ever were driving through or flying, you said, ooh, we better not go into that neighborhood, it's a Jewish neighborhood? You never heard that come out of anyone's mouth. There's no such thing. No one ever said, ooh, we better not go into that neighborhood because it's full of Jews. As if in some way that's a scary thing. It's not. We don't hurt people. We don't like hurting people. We don't like war. We don't like bloodshed. You know what we like? We like calm, bagels and lox, peace, some sushi, and a few prayers here and there, and a few yomtivs. Which, by the way, someone wrote today on the internet that if people would just study some history, they'd realize that the only thing they're doing by messing with the Jews now is that we're going to make a new yomtiv soon to celebrate our victory over them, right? Purim, Hanukkah, Pesach, every yomtiv we have, 100%. We're going to have a meal. We're going to be eating Middle Eastern food to commemorate the fact that we kicked their butt. But we don't like it. We don't like it. There's no Jew I know that's sane and healthy that likes war. It doesn't exist. We don't have a choice. And Jacob was teaching us something incredible here, that yes, we are meek, and yes, we are weak, and that's our foundation, because it's all about God, not about us. We're not narcissists, we're not arrogant. But when you're dealing with the Esau's of the world, please go to the door and see if he needs to be let in. When you're dealing with the Esau's of the world, you have no choice. Because if they see weakness, if they see a sensitive edel, if they see a refined person, they take advantage of that. If they see strength, if they see boldness, or if you show them enough boldness that it gets them confused, now you're talking. And they do. They really believe today that they can make Jews hide and duck. And I recall years ago, I was sitting with Big Mo. Big Mo is, I think his name is Moshe. What's his last name? No, not Moshe. Mordechai Ziv. He's a rabbi in Tzfat at the Ascent Kabbalah Center. And I spent 2 years in Tzfat. And he told me that when he was a college student in State University of New York in Buffalo, back then there was the JDL, not the ADL, the JDL, Jewish Defense League. There were some wild guys. It wasn't worth messing with them. They took the defense of the Jewish people seriously. So he said a guy once was driving by in Buffalo in the winter, and he screamed out the window, "Hail Hitler." So he jumped in his car and followed the guy. When he finally stopped either at a red light or parked, he broke the antenna off the guy's car. Then on the trunk of his car, he engraved the Star of David with the antenna. So don't worry, that guy never screamed "Hail Hitler" again from the car, right? Sometimes Jews, we have to close our Sfarim, sometimes our holy books, and you have to teach the world that we're not pushovers. That the days of writing Jewish people's obituaries, and you sound all eloquent, meanwhile we're dropping dead like flies and you're writing obituaries instead of writing that we stood up to defend ourselves. So we prefer as a nation being scoffed by the UN and the EU and all the other Jew haters, instead of them writing our obituaries all beautifully later. And that happens when we realize that although we are Jacobs, when you're encountering Esau, you got to put the sheep aside, and still your majority property, your majority of who you are is the sheep. But what do you put in the front? That's where you put your ox, that's where you put your donkey, that's where you put your 9mm, just to make sure they know, right? I pray, I study Torah, I do mitzvahs, and right in front of me, I also have a 9mm. So if that doesn't work, we know how to deal with that too. We don't want to. I will never, like Golda Meir said, we can forgive the Arabs for killing our children. We can't forgive them for forcing us to kill theirs. I can forgive the Arabs for a lot of things. I can't forgive them for the fact that my Shalom Bozeman has to have weapons to protect it. It bothers me. It always has. Like, why do we have to deal with guns? We hate this stuff. But we have no choice. We'd rather deal with the stuff we hate than deal with Jews dying like flies. And I can't forgive them for that. But we'll do whatever it takes. Because the first halacha in Shulchan Aruch in the Code of Jewish Law is to be bold like a leopard. And even if you're primarily a submissive, devoted Jew to God who likes praying and being in a different realm, you also have to do what it takes to protect yourself, your families, your communities, and be bold as a leopard so that when Esau shows up, he thinks twice and 3 times before he messes with a tough Jew. And that's our message for tonight. Learn Torah, do mitzvahs, pray a lot, give a lot of tzedakah, and then go get yourself whatever you need to protect your families, because that's the language of boldness that Esau understands. Don't ever back down. Don't ever take off that yarmulke because you're scared that someone might, so what? If you weren't wearing a yarmulke, start. If you weren't wearing tzitzit, start. If you weren't keeping Shabbos, start. If you weren't keeping kosher, start. That's the identity that the Jewish world needs to see. That's the identity that the greater community needs to see. And when we live that way, we carry the torch of Jacob, the torch that will carry us all the way into the time when there will be no more hunger, no more war, no more homelessness, and no more envy and animosity. That the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu may be speedily in our days. Amen. But for next Wednesday night, we will not have class because we have the Farbrengen for Yudtas Kislev at the same time right here at the shul, 7 p.m. with Rabbi Avrami Zippel of Salt Lake City, Utah. Look forward to seeing you then. Sei gesund. Happy Thanksgiving. There's so much to be grateful for every day. But if you want to do it tomorrow with a turkey, gesundheit, make sure it's a kosher turkey. And when you give thanks to God. It's not Veterans Day. Veterans Day is for veterans. Tomorrow is to give thanks to God for giving us a country that allows us, at least as of today, allows us to worship. Yeah, we're colonizing. Allows us to worship freely. It allows us to worship freely as Jews. It's a kingdom of kindness that has allowed the Jews to celebrate freely and to be Jewish freely. And we hope that that continues for all eternity. Sei gesund, a freilichen Thanksgiving, and we'll see you back here next week. Sei gesund. All you and your commentary. Jews and their opinions. Is he here?
Yeah.
Okay. No problem. I have a reporter. Zaidi, it was really nice to see you here, Marshall.
Nice to be here. I really.
How long are you going to stick around in Bozeman?
I'm going back on Sunday.
Oh, really? And then, you're here for Thanksgiving. You're coming back for Hanukkah?
Of course.
So we'll see you Hanukkah. Are you sticking around? Oh, you're just here for Thanksgiving too?
Thanksgiving.
I'm coming back the end of the year also with my son and grandson, my other son.
From where? From California?
Los Angeles.
Very nice. Jan, sei gesund. Good to see you. Rock and roll. A freilichen Thanksgiving. I can't hear you. You're muted.
Eric, I was trying to unmute. I just wanted to tell you quickly, and
Yeah.
happy Thanksgiving and good Shabbos to you and to your family. Is that one of your beautiful daughters next to
It
you?
is.
But when you mentioned have turkey, but make sure it's kosher, I want to tell you that Marnie in Joburg is she's making a Thanksgiving dinner
In South Africa.
in South Africa. And she said to find a kosher turkey in Joburg was next to impossible. But she